Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Granga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Narayanam namaskritya Naram chaiva narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayet Shinvatam Svakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtanaha Vidyantastohya Bhadrani Vidunoti Suhitsatam Nashtapraya Shabhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki.
Hi, Daddy.
You scared me.
Hi, Daddy.
Hi, Dhruva.
Hi.
Hi.
Okay.
Oh, bye. Hare Krishna. Okay.
With you?
No. Please go sit with Mommy. Okay, so technology doesn't always work. I was apparently given a message at some point this morning that I'm giving class, and it didn't come to me, so that's okay. We had a nice long Jaya Radha Madhava, led by Brihad Mridanga Prabhu. Haribo. Thank you for that. So today, let's see here. Give me a second. I'm playing catch up. We are reading from the first canto. Still in the first canto. Chapter 5, verses 23 through 40. And then we'll read the purport of verse 40, and we'll do the Sanskrit from 40. So what we'll do is, let's have, we'll go around to everybody, and someone can read a verse, and then we'll do the Sanskrit together in 40, and then we can have volunteers to read the purport in 40. So I'll start. Why not? Oh yes, one more mantra. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Bhagavate Vasudevaya. All right. So reading in Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 5, verse 23 through 40. Woo. So, 23. O Muni, in the last millennium, I was born as the son of a certain maidservant engaged in the service of Brahmanas who were following the principles of Vedanta. When they were living together during the 4 months of the rainy season, I was engaged in their personal service. Microphone, someone would like to read the next verse?
Blessed me with their causeless mercy. As far as I was concerned, I was self-controlled and had no attachment for sports, even though I was a boy. In addition, I was not naughty, and I did not speak more than required.
Once only, by their permission, I took the remnants of their food, and by so doing all my sins were at once eradicated. Thus being engaged, I became purified in heart, and at that time the very nature of the transcendentalist became attractive to me.
O Vyasadeva, in that association and by the mercy of these great Vedantists, I could hear them describe the attractive activities of Lord Krishna, and thus listening attentively, my taste for hearing of the personality of Godhead increased at every step.
Kaylee, you want to read?
Sure. O great sage, as soon as I got a taste for the personality of Godhead, my attention to hear of the Lord was unflinching, and my taste developed. I could realize that it was only in my ignorance that I had accepted gross and subtle coverings, for both the Lord and I are transcendental.
Thus, during 2 seasons, the rainy season and autumn, I had the opportunity to hear these great-souled sages constantly chant the unadulterated glories of the Lord Hari. As soon as the flow of my devotional service began, the coverings of the modes of passion and ignorance vanished.
Text 29, I was very much attached to those sages. I was gentle in behavior, and all my sins were eradicated in their service. In my heart I had strong faith in them. I had subjugated the senses, and I was strictly following them with body and mind.
As they were leaving, those Bhakti Vedantas who were very kind to poor-hearted souls instructed me in that most confidential subject, which is instructed by the personality of Godhead himself.
By that confidential knowledge, I could understand clearly the influence of the energy of Lord Sri Krishna, the creator, maintainer, and annihilator of everything. By knowing that, one can return to him and personally meet him.
O Brahmana Vyasadeva, it is decided by the learned that the best remedial measure for removing all troubles and miseries is to dedicate one's activities to the service of the Supreme Lord, Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna.
Oh my God. No way.
O good soul, does not a thing, applied therapeutically, cure a disease which was caused by that very same thing?
Thus, when all a man's activities are dedicated to the service of the Lord, those very activities which caused him his perpetual bondage become the destroyer of the tree of work.
Whatever work is done here in this life for the satisfaction of the mission of the Lord is called Bhakti Yoga, or transcendental loving service to the Lord. And what is called knowledge becomes a concomitant factor.
It's according to the order of Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One constantly remembers him, his names, and his qualities.
Let us all chant the glories of Vasudeva along with his plenary expansions, Pradyumna, Aniruddha, and Sankarshana. Jai.
Thus he is the actual seer who worships in the form of transcendental sound representation, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu, who has no material form.
O Brahmana, thus by the Supreme Lord, Krishna, I was endowed first with the transcendental knowledge of the Lord as inculcated in the confidential parts of the Vedas, then with the spiritual opulences, and then with his intimate, loving service.
Please therefore describe the Almighty Lord's activities which you have learned by your vast knowledge of the Vedas, for that will satisfy the hankerings of great learned men, and at the same time mitigate the miseries of the masses of common people who are always suffering from material pangs. Indeed, there is no other way to get out of such miseries.
Okay, let's do the Sanskrit here of number 40, text 40. Got that? Okay. Tvam apyadabra shuta vishutam vibho apyadabra shuta vishutam vibho samapyate yena vidam bubhut sitam apyate yena vidam bubhut sitam prakyahiduker muhur ardiratmanam Sanklesha nirvanam ushanti nanyata nirvanam Tvamapyadabra shuta vishuddham vibho apyadabra shuta vishuddham vibho samapyate yena vidam bubhut sitam Yatayena vidam vibhut sitam prakyahiduker muhur ardiratmanam Sanklesha nirvanam ushanti nanyata Nirvanam ashanti Bolo. Tamapyadabra shuta vishutam vibho samapyate yena vidam bubush sitam prakyahiduke muhur arditatmanam sanklesha nirvana mushanti nanyata. Sanklesha nirvana mushanti nanyata. Tamapyadabra shuta vishutam vibho samapyate yena vidam vibhushitam prakyahiduker muhu arditatmanam sanklesha nirvana mushanti nanyata. They're my bag. Samapyadabra sruta vishutam vibho samapyate yena vidam vibhushitam prakyahiduke muhu ardiratmanam sanklesha nirvana mushanti nanyata. Okay, word for word. Tvam, your good soul. Api, also. Adabra, vast. Shruta, Vedic literatures. Vishrutam, having heard also. Have heard also. Vibhoho, of the Almighty. Samapyate, satisfied. Yena, by which. Vidam, of the learned. Vibhutsitam, who always desire to learn transcendental knowledge. Prakyahi, describe. Dukkahi, by miseries. Mohu, always. Ardita atmanam, suffering mass of people. Sanklesha, sufferings. Nirvanam, mitigation. Ushantina, do not get out of. Anyata, by other means. Okay, I'll read the translation again. Please therefore describe the Almighty Lord's activities which you have learned by your vast knowledge of the Vedas. For that will satisfy the hankerings of great learned men, and at the same time mitigate the miseries of the masses of common people who are always suffering from material pangs. Indeed, there is no other way to get out of such miseries. Purport, who wants to read? Who's ready?
Ready.
Go for it.
Sri Narada Muni, from practical experience, definitely asserts that the prime solution of all problems of material work is to broadcast very widely the transcendental glories of the Supreme Lord. There are 4 classes of good men, and there are 4 classes of bad men also. The 4 classes of good men acknowledge the authority of the Almighty God, and therefore such good men, 1, when they are in difficulty, 2, when they are in need of money, 3, when they are advanced in knowledge, and 4, when they are inquisitive to know more and more about God, intuitively take shelter of the Lord. As such, Naradaji advises Vyasadeva to broadcast the transcendental knowledge of God in terms of the vast Vedic knowledge which he had already attained.
Someone else?
As far as the bad men are concerned, they are also 4 in number. 1. Those who are simply addicted to the mode of progressive fruit of work, and thus are subjected to the accompanying miseries. 2. Those who are simply addicted to vicious work for sense satisfaction, and so suffer the consequences. 3. Those who are materially very much advanced in knowledge, but who suffer because they do not have the sense to acknowledge the authority of the Almighty Lord. And 4. The class of men who are known as atheists, and who therefore purposely hate the very name of God, although they are always in difficulty.
Sri Naradaji advised Vyasadeva and described the glories of the Lord just to do good to all 8 classes of men, both good and bad. Srimad Bhagavatam is therefore not meant for any particular class of man or sect. It is for the essence soul who actually wants his own welfare and peace of mind. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 1st canto, 5th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Narada's Instructions on Srimad Bhagavatam for Vyasadeva.
Jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srila Narada Muni ki jai. Srila Vyasadeva ki jai. It's interesting in this last paragraph, it's describing that all the Bhagavatam is meant for any particular class of men, and it's meant for everybody. But then it says it is for the sincere soul who actually wants his own welfare and peace of mind. So it's for everyone, and we go out and we chant Hare Krishna. We introduce Krishna consciousness to everyone. But the only person that will accept it is the sincere soul who actually wants their own welfare and peace of mind. I know it just struck me as funny because you have the good people, which are described here. You have the good people, and then you have the bad people, the bad men. Yes, Prabhupada is pointing this out. There are good and bad elements, particularly in the material world. So what is the defining difference between the two? Can you say? Anyone? I'm going to start calling on somebody. Arjuna, what do you think?
The bad people, they want sense gratification. They suffer the consequences. And
the good people do what?
They're detached from sense gratification.
Close. Very close. There's a very specific distinction between the two. In every circumstance, what does the good person do? What is their core thing? They have some interest in what? I mean, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. Yeah. Any other idea? Just what you were saying. I mean, it's
reading up there. It says that the bad people do fruitive work. It says they're addicted to vicious work for sense gratification.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's true. Gaur-Hari?
A little further up in the purport, it says, the four classes of good men acknowledge the authority of the Almighty God, and therefore they're such good men. Yeah, and then he describes them. So they accept Krishna's authority, whereas the bad men do not.
Right, and bad men do not. Yeah, that's the core thing. That's the core thing. You know, in this material world, people do so many philanthropic things. They've created so many wonderful scientific creations. They've done so many so-called beneficial things for humanity. And if it has a spirit of atheism, ultimately it's actually bad, right? Because any good work you do in this material world binds you to this material world, right? And if in the name of atheism you do something good for all of society, what happens? People become more atheistic, right? And this is bad, because the primary things you cannot solve in this material world are what? Do you guys know the four things? Four sufferings of the material world that everyone is destined to endure. Matthew?
You have birth, death, old age and disease.
Old age and disease. Nailed it. Yeah, you're not going to stop that. It doesn't matter what your material arrangement is, right? And the atheists make quite a bit of a deal about themselves and the arrangements they've made to stop disease, to stop death. And if you ask them honestly in a back room, maybe they'll admit that they can't stop any of these things, or that they're just part of life, and so whatever. You know, it's just like, well, you can't do anything about that. You know. But still they'll make piles and piles and piles of pharmaceuticals that create piles and piles and piles of other diseases on top of them. So much difficulty is there. It's created. Because they simply want to stop death? I mean, really? The real benefit ultimately is that the soul doesn't have a material body at all. And that way go back to Godhead. So therefore it is the ultimate sinful thing, actually, atheism, because you limit someone's ability to actually achieve lasting and meaningful happiness. Therefore atheism is, the root of all types of suffering. Primarily it's the reason we have to go through birth, death, old age, and disease. And so on the other side, the propagation of Krishna consciousness and the educating the living entities about the spirit soul is the only way to get out of such miseries, as this verse says. Indeed, there is no other way to get out of such miseries. The common people are always suffering from the pangs of material nature, and And the learned are hankering for relief as well. They being bewildered and confused by so many contradictions. Shishi Radhanila Madhava Ki Jai. Being bewildered by so many contradictions presented by material nature, its relativity and its limitations, the learned are hankering after real knowledge. And real knowledge ultimately means knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Because, well, there's nothing else. There's just Krishna. It's Krishna's party, and we're part of it. Or we're trying to pretend not to be a part of it at this point. Yeah. So I'm going to go back to verse 32, and I'll just read it here. O Brahmana Vyasadeva, it is decided by the learned that the best remedial measure for removing all troubles and miseries is to dedicate one's activities to the service of the Supreme Lord, Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. So we're getting the theme here, right? This is the theme. Now this is really cool, and this is particularly related to Krishna house, right? O good soul, well, Krishna consciousness, period, does not a thing applied therapeutically cure a disease which was caused by that very same thing? So we all like to talk, so we learn to talk, but we talk about Krishna. So it's the same thing applied therapeutically, right? We like to sing, so we sing about Krishna. In Krishna house, one of the core guiding educational principles is to help students, help the prospective, devotee, learn how to see themselves in Krishna consciousness, which means how to be who you are, what you have to work with in Krishna's service. Like I'm a musician, so how can I use that in Krishna's service? Or I'm a writer, how can I use that in Krishna's service? Or whatever it is, I have particular desire to serve Krishna. And at first it's not immediately apparent sometimes. And also sometimes what we were doing before, if we too soon try to use it in Krishna's service, it can create, can bring back our false ego, our old, behaviors and everything. So at first we have to learn how to do things for Krishna first. And so sometimes we put our own nature and proclivities to the side, temporarily speaking, so we can learn how to please Krishna. So there's one verse in Bhagavad-Gita. It says, one who is in knowledge of the absolute truth, almighty armed, does not engage himself in the senses and sense gratification, knowing well the difference between work in devotion and work for fruitive results. So when one understands how to work in devotion for Krishna, then they can go back into what they already possess and learn how to use that in Krishna's service. The guiding principle is, how can I act in such a way that I am regularly getting purified? How can I use all of my mind, body, and senses in the facility that Krishna has already given me in Krishna's service? And you're being successful at doing that if you don't generate within your mind and others the mode of passion and the mode of ignorance. This is success in practical activity. So to learn that art takes some practice and some time, and therefore it's very, very helpful to live in an ashram, have daily practice every day, engage in Krishna's service. And then when you learn that art, you feel that reciprocation, you feel that purification, you know how to then apply other things in Krishna's service gradually. Yeah. Do you have a question? Microphone.
How would enthusiasm be considered? Like sometimes we need to be enthusiastic about things. It might seem like passionate seems like it might not be a bad thing.
Well, there's a difference between enthusiasm and passion. Passion is, again, it's working for fruitive results. That's the definition of passion.
Okay.
You can enthusiastically work in Krishna consciousness without, desiring a result or wanting a result. If you are working for a result, the result might come in a way Krishna wants it to come, and not in a way you want it to come. And so when the result comes in Krishna's way, if you're attached, that's mode of passion, right? Then anger will come, frustration, and these other degrading qualities come out. If we enthusiastically engage in Krishna's service, detached from the result and knowing that Krishna is the doer, because we understand actually we just need to do Krishna's service so we can become purified and actually become happy. That is enthusiasm that's devoid of the mode of passion.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
And then everything you do in Krishna consciousness is just simply blissful. Really, this is like a big part of what Bhagavad-Gita is teaching, how to do your duty, particularly do it for Krishna, without attachment to the result. And if you do it, if you comprehend what your duty is, and you comprehend the entire scope of what you're supposed to be doing, then that makes for a service well done. You don't have to worry about the results, because actually the good result is baked into the description of the service, if you fully understand your service, right? If you put a garland on Prabhupada that just had like a few flowers on it, and you're like, oh, I did my service, I don't care about the result. Well, the service requires that Prabhupada has a full garland, you know what I mean? So you do the service like that. If Prabhupada's pleased, or people are pleased by that, that's, result is there. So, what's a good question? Do you guys have any questions? Krishna Kripa Prabhu.
Very good example of that is Srila Prabhupada. When he first came, he literally was by himself, and he honestly had only the money he was getting from selling his books. So the 40 rupees he arrived with are useless then, and are just as useless now, because no money transfer company will take rupees in America. Yeah. So he actually started just with the faith in the Bhagavatams and spiritual master, etc. And he said to his devotees, if you don't have anyone to preach to, then preach to the walls. And the example that I wanted to bring out is that the introduction to the Bhagavad-Gita was exactly that. Prabhupada recorded it sitting in a room by itself, preaching to the walls. And it's so encompassing as to as such an example. What is the Bhagavad-Gita? There's so much information there.
Yeah.
And it's just beautiful, And Prabhupada was just literally its stream of consciousness.
Yeah.
So you can get a heads up to what it means to be a pure devotee, where all your activities are given to Krishna, and we can start somewhere.
Yeah.
Getting that.
Very nice. Thank you for bringing that up, because this another previous chronologically in Prabhupada's mission makes this point too, that Prabhupada initially he wanted to have a successful business, have money, and then he'd engage that in spreading Krishna consciousness. And Krishna dismantled that, right? Krishna wanted him to not be dependent on this process, right? That first I make money and then I engage in Krishna's service. Rather, when all that was dismantled, and then Prabhupada sincerely then just engaged in the service of Krishna directly and not putting it off in that sense, then all the success came. And so this is the same principle, that Prabhupada's nature that he was given by Krishna was to be an excellent manager, businessman, and also a writer. And he put the business and the money first, right? Then he was thinking, then I'll preach, and then I'll use that to do my writings and everything. So Krishna had a different idea. Krishna wanted to dismantle that whole thing first, so that he would come to the position of not having to rely on these things secondarily. And then that same nature was used again in Krishna's service as the society grew and became more and more wealthy, and Prabhupada's ability to manage money and run business became fully utilized again. But Krishna engaged it after the preaching started. Does that make sense? So in the same way, we live in Krishna house. We learn how to become Krishna conscious first. And then when you learn how to become Krishna conscious, when you learn the difference between work and devotion, work for fruit of results, then you can take everything you've already known and you can use it in Krishna's service. Everything you already do, you use it in Krishna's service like that. So I think Prabhupada is the living example of that as well. Any other questions? I know Brihad had something.
Narada Muni says in this verse that Krishna's glories will satisfy the hankerings of transcendentalists, and it will satisfy the suffering of the common people. So it's for everybody, and it's good for everybody. So why did Srila Vyasadeva write everything before that? Why didn't he just write the Bhagavatam and stop there and say, job well done?
Mm. Wow, that's a good question. Well, you could say a few things. There's always the component of a instructional component, just like Arjuna. Why did Arjuna become bewildered on the battlefield? It's kind of the same, you could say the same thing. It was because Krishna wanted to show the progression, spiritual consciousness, surrendering to a spiritual master, then getting the right direction, and then following that direction and achieving success. He wrote all about and this ends up being the primary thing. He wrote all about all sorts of material things for upliftment in the material world, all these different layers, because he's trying to be as broad-minded as he can and involve everybody and envelop them into a process so that they can be elevated. And after so much endeavor and work and thinking about everybody, putting it all down, he's not satisfied because the actual result would not be achieved. Right, and to make a distinction about that, this lesson is there. If you take it chronologically, you could say, because he wrote about all these material things, naturally he became bewildered, and so he needed a transcendental devotee to come and show him that. Of course, we know Vyasadeva is, literary incarnation of Krishna, so he's fully aware of what he's doing. So. Seems to me there's an instruction in there more than anything for that reason. That's what comes to my mind. Radha Krishna Prabhu, is there something extra you'd like to? He's thumbs up, okay. He's okay. Jai, I'll take that. That's good. Oh, yes, please. Krishna Kripa Prabhu.
I apologize. I haven't been here in class most of this week. I hear pieces of it when I'm at home doing the puja. I'm not able to get here for various interesting reasons, most of them having to do with the material energy. But there's a point, and I don't know if you've covered it already, because I don't know if it's in the 5th or the 6th chapter, when Narada is talking to Vyasadeva. And Prabhupada writes a really powerful purport that's really based just exactly on that verse about how whatever we have, we give to Krishna. Have you had that verse yet? Because I don't want to go ahead of it.
No, I don't know.
But there's a special situation with Vyasadeva in terms of why he wrote what he wrote. But Narada Muni tells him directly to give what you have in this world that you can offer to Krishna. And he said that should be what we offer with great effort. Vyasadeva was the last person to know all the Vedas because he taught only a fourth of it to 4 of his disciples. So Narada Muni tells him, give what you only can give. And that was that knowledge. So therefore the Vedanta Sutta comes in as the commentary on the entire Veda.
Mm-hmm. And then Bhagavatam is a commentary.
Yeah, and so because of that, then he's now given the task of only explaining that part which describes the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Sure.
Because you can't do it in the broader spectrum of the the Vedanta, because Vedanta has so much knowledge there. But that's the one thing that Narada told him that he could give that no one else could give. His perception of the Vedas and human life was unique at that point in time.
Yeah. And people need to be developed gradually also. So if he's truly going to give benefit to all society, he has to hit different levels of different living entities. But ultimately that's not necessary, right? They can just hear Bhagavatam. Yeah, nice points. Thank you. This verse here, thus when a man's activities are dedicated to the service of the Lord, those very activities which caused his perpetual bondage become the destroyer of the tree of work. So I was just thinking about what Kaylee had said about enthusiasm in spiritual life. And the reality is that to make a long-term stab at becoming Krishna conscious, you do have to do this. You have to use those very activities that had previously were causing your perpetual bondage. Right? We were doing those things with great enthusiasm, weren't we? Whatever it was, whatever we were doing before. We had much enthusiasm for them because it's engaging the nature that we've wanted to acquire from material energy over the cultivation of many lifetimes. So devotional service is actually, it's not easy, but it's a natural process. It's a process that's conducive for all living entities because the very nature of the soul to be active and to serve the Supreme Lord is engaged. And also the very nature of the soul as conditioned by material nature can be engaged in Krishna service as well. So in that sense it's also very natural. And if one wants to make an extended long-term stab at becoming Krishna conscious, you have to find a long-term service that you can fully put yourself into. That is, it sustains you. It inspires you to, wake up every day. Like, for example, I've always wanted to do something like Krishna House. I've always wanted to provide a space for people to live in an ashram and do the basic things in Krishna consciousness. And I've always wanted to, manage things like that. So having this opportunity creates this level of inspiration and satisfaction in my heart that just impels me to do my very best because it's something I love to do. And to make a long-term stab, again, at becoming Krishna conscious, we have to find kind of our niche, so to speak, and what really inspires. Some people are really inspired by deity worship. Some people are really inspired by book distribution. Some people are really inspired by Harinam Sankirtan. Some people are really inspired by simply cleaning. Some people are inspired by talking to business professionals. Some people are inspired by doing a restaurant. Some people are inspired by working in the restaurant. So many different things. Some people are inspired simply by sitting in a group of friends and talking. And this is really what gives them enthusiasm. So anything, everything. I'm going to go extreme. Prabhupada said we can even use bombs in Krishna's service. Okay, I don't know how to do that. I'm not saying I'm going to do that. But everything can be used in Krishna's service. Everything can be used in Krishna's service. And it is just a matter of, figuring out how to do that without it becoming a cause of bondage. And so that gets back to what we were saying before. One must learn how to learn the difference between work and devotion and work for fruit of results. On the surface level, anything you do for Krishna is obviously purifying. It's not work for fruit of results. But we have to understand the mentality of the mode of passion, right? We're talking about the difference between serving Krishna with enthusiasm and serving him in the mode of passion, right? With a desire for some kind of fame, profit, distinction, or adoration. You just jump to that. or whatever it might be. So if we can remove that desire of wanting maybe some specific kind of result and becoming agitated if it doesn't get there, or desire for fame, profit, distinction, or adoration, if we can be free from these things in the course of doing devotional service, because we're souls, we have to desire what's a proper desire. Let's go around, let's throw out words. What's a proper desire to have when doing devotional service that's devoid of desiring a result? Desiring others to be happy. What if they're not happy? Happy in Krishna consciousness. There we go. Hare Krishna. Someone else? To please your spiritual master. Jai. What would please the spiritual master? Following his, what are his instructions? Chant Hare Krishna. Okay, thank you. Hare Krishna. Put Krishna in the center. Chant Hare Krishna. Actually, they asked Prabhupada, what would please you? And he said, I came here to teach you how to chant Hare Krishna, so chant Hare Krishna and I'm pleased. We read that. We read that in our morning announcement. Arjuna. Desiring work to be useful?
Desiring the service you did to prove useful to the devotees or to please them.
Very nice, because the devotees want to serve Krishna. Nice. Become a servant of the devotees. The desire to become the servant of the devotees. Gandiva, you had something. I was just kidding. What do you think is a good desire to have while doing devotional service?
Desiring to see other people grow and evolve as well, like those around us.
Evolve in
Krishna consciousness.
Krishna consciousness, yeah. We don't have a relative understanding of development. We have an absolute understanding. And grow with us in Krishna. That we all grow in Krishna consciousness, which means to understand and love Krishna more and more. Okay, a couple more.
Desire purification.
Desire purification, yes. And behind, Prabhu, I don't know your...
Mukti or liberation.
Desire liberation, whoa. All right. In Krishna consciousness, yes. Everything can be there, but Krishna has to be there too. If Krishna is not there, then it's Maya. Because it says in the second canto, anything you perceive to have an existence separate from my own, know that to be of my illusory energy. That's basically what he says. Okay, one more. Ali, you had something? Oh no. It's unlimited.
Maybe just being more receptive to like what Krishna desires.
Oh.
Yeah. Like in the moment, like being able to come to goodness, to listen to Paramatma, and then choose him over our own desires.
So while we're doing service, have a desire to be aware of what Krishna wants and how he wants us to do a thing.
In Krishna consciousness.
In Krishna consciousness. Yeah, Krishna wants us to do anything and everything without... What was I going to say? I forgot. You have to read Prabhupada's books. I'll tell you in there. Okay, thank you very much. Grant read Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai.